I am going to share my screen and tell you all about dragonflies. Okay, can everybody see my screen? Okay, excellent. So thank you very much to Palos Verdes South Bay Audubon for inviting me to talk today. And particularly for Jen Gardner for contacting me and for our hosting today. I was on a string of emails discussing who should give a presentation on dragonflies. And so some names were brought up before mine came up. They were included Ross or Garrison and Jeff Cole. These are entomologists who have studied dragonflies extensively. And eventually going down the list of available presenters, my name came up. And I responded, well, if you can't book Elton John or Paul McCartney, then I'll be happy to be your wedding singer. I am not an expert on dragonflies. I'm not an entomologist, but I guess I do know more than the average person. I have developed some level of expertise through taking the entomology classes, but also from my photographs. I've been photographing wildlife, birds, reptiles, and insects in our local area for quite a while now, and have amassed a good catalog of photos. And I've been enjoying some of the dragonfly photos, and that's how I have learned about the dragonflies. I've also participated in your dragonfly count last year with Vincent. And so all the photos in this program are mine, with one exception of a photo of me that my husband took, but all the rest are my photos. So today I'm going to give you an introduction to our local dragons and dragonflies, and also our damselflies. To start with, these are not dragonflies. Dragonflies and damsels are not dragons, and they are not damsels. And I don't know the exact origin of the term of why do they call them dragonflies, but they have appeared widely in folklore. Some believed that dragonflies once were dragons. In Romanian folklore, the dragonfly was thought to be St. George's horse. St. George was the one who killed the dragon or wounded the dragon. And they believed that his horse was cursed by the devil and became a giant flying insect. Perhaps that's what our dragonfly is. In Swedish folklore, people believed that the devil was sending dragonflies to circle a person and get a measure of their soul. So if you have dragonflies circling you, that came from the devil, and they're measuring your soul. Some have said that they are devil's darning needles, and they're used to sew up the mouths of bad children. Even today, some people think that they sting, and maybe that's why they're called dragons, but they're not dragons. Going along with the theme of dragons, the more delicate ones, they call damselflies, dragons and damsels. But dragonflies are also not a fly, even though that's in their name too. Like butterflies are not flies. They're in a different order. You have an order of flies all by themselves, and which are Diptera, and then you have an order of butterflies, which are Lepidoptera, and then you have an order of dragonflies, which is Odonata, or odonates, as they're sometimes called, or shortened to odes. Often people refer to both damsels and dragons because they're both odonates as odes or dragonflies, but there are two suborders, one for dragonflies and one for damsels, and I prefer to split them up that way. So when I talk about dragonflies, I'm usually talking about the larger ones, and the damselflies are the smaller ones. But they are all insects. So first I'm going to talk about the anatomy. The anatomy is important for you to understand how a dragonfly operates, and also a little bit of help when we talk about identifying them. They are insects, so they have 3 body parts. They have a head with the sensory organs. They have a thorax, and the thorax has the wings and the legs attached to him. And they have an abdomen where their guts and reproductive parts are. When I'm going through how to identify them or anatomy, I'm looking at it more the way that birders look at jizz. And a lot of birders will look at each of the individual feathers and look at the primaries and the secondaries, but also you can look through jizz, which is a general impression of shape and size. I'm not going to make you into entomologists here today, but I am going to give you enough information about the anatomy so that you know where to look for some things. And there's a dragonfly. It's an insect with a head, a thorax, and an abdomen. And you can see it's got that segmented abdomen. They have had this body plan for millions of years. They really haven't changed much because they're very well adapted to what they do. The damselfly looks very much like the dragonfly. It's got the head, the thorax, and the very long abdomen. But you can see that they're thinner and more delicate than our dragons. So that's going to be your first clue in identifying them. Is it a big, robust insect, or is it one of these more delicate insects, which is the damsel? Another difference is in the way that they hold their wings. The dragonfly generally holds them out, and the damselfly holds them together. And you can see that in this illustration. Damselflies are not as good flyers as our dragonflies. There is an exception of a spread-winged damselfly, but we really aren't going to see them in our local area, so I'm not going to talk about them. So the head of the dragonfly, you can see it's got those huge eyes, those huge, large compound eyes, give them almost 360 degrees of vision. Imagine them like your raptors. They are going to be predatory and they are going to see their prey, and that's the main sense that they're going to be using for finding them. The head of the dragonfly, the eyes are together, and on the damselfly, you can see that they are stalked, so they look a little bit different. The damselfly has them spread out. They have these large compound eyes, and each one of those little facets gives them a level of vision. And then they also have simple eyes, and this is true of a lot of insects, where they have the compound eye, and then they may have simple eyes, also these 3 simple eyes that can detect light and dark. They really don't detect images, but they help them understand where they are relative to the sun. Are they upright? Are they down? Gives them some stability and positioning. Also on their head, they have antennae. I've pointed to these because they're very tiny little antennae. You've probably seen insects that have very large antennae. Butterflies have longer antennae. A lot of insects use those antennae for sensory organs. They may even have some chemoreceptors so that they can taste and sense what plant they're on. Well, dragonflies are going to be eating mostly in flight, and so they're not going to need those chemoreceptors as much. They're using their vision to find their prey. So they have these tiny little antennae that can detect wind and vibrations that can help them in flying and positioning. They have interesting legs. You've seen insects crawling around on the ground. Well, these insects don't walk around on the ground. They're going to be flying, but they do have legs, and their legs are going to be for holding on to things, for perching. or for holding on to a stalk. The image in the center shows that the legs can also curl up under their front of them and be used almost like a basket to scoop up insects. If you look at the image on the left, it looks like that dragonfly has 4 legs, but if you look more closely, you'll see 2 smaller legs that are kind of folded up near the head. Those are going to be using for cleaning the eyes and also for helping to catch prey. Wings on a dragonfly are fairly primitive. They've had this same model for millions of years, but they don't fold up the way that other wings on other insects do. The veins and coloration on it is very important for identifying the dragonfly. We're not going to be looking at the individual veins, which is what a lot of entomologists would be looking at under a microscope to look at some of these veins to determine which dragonfly it is. But we are going to be using that color that's at the base of the wing. And you can also look at that other little part near the end of the wing that's called the pterostigma. And those colorations are going to be important even for us. You know, it's kind of like the veins on insects and on dragonflies particularly. It's kind of like looking at feather groups that you know the name of each individual feather group. Well, that can help you to identify for certain a bird. Well, the veins can help identify for certain the dragonfly, but it's not necessary to know all of the birds that way, or the dragonflies for that matter. So the abdomen is very interesting. You know, it has 10 segments, and the colors can change on a dragonfly on the abdomen with temperature. So early in the morning or while it's cool, it may have one coloration. I mean, it's going to be a similar coloration, but it's going to become more vibrant as the temperature rises. And females are going to be more variable than the male. They may resemble males sometimes, but they're going to be a little bit more variable than the males. The tip of the abdomen is going to have special tools at the end. And that's kind of interesting for dragonflies, that these tools on the male, it's going to be used for grasping the female. And the female is going to have almost like little blades at the end for cutting into reeds. The males also have a second set of genitalia, not just the ones on the tip, but also another one under the second segment of the abdomen. And that segment is where is going to be very important in fertilizing and the whole reproduction process. And I'm going to talk more about that. But just remember that it actually has 2 sets of genitalia on the male. The life cycle of the dragonfly. They're kind of interesting because when we do our dragonfly counts, we're going to be looking at those mature adults, and that's what we see all the time. And they're just fascinating, darting around. But I was trying to create a diagram that would show you the whole life cycle. And then also, if you look as an adult, adults only live for a few weeks to a few months. Actually, it could even only be a few hours if they have predators. But as a large portion of their life cycle, they live as larvae, which are also called nymphs, or in dragonflies and damselflies called the naiad. And that can be up to 1 to 4 years, depending on conditions and also on the species. Most of our species will have only 1 year of development. But most of that time is underwater. So we're not even going to be seeing them if we're walking around and looking for birds and looking for dragonflies. You're not going to see them. The egg is embedded in reeds or in the mud, And then they will go through this life cycle. They can molt up to 12 sides. These are insects, and insects have exoskeletons, which means that in order to grow, they have to shed that exoskeleton and then have one larger and then one larger. As they keep eating and molting, they get bigger and bigger. So there's our adult dragonfly, and that's what we are used to seeing. Males can establish territories, and they're on their lookout for mates. And they're going to be looking around suitable water where female will be laying her eggs. So peak mating is around midday. So if you go out birding in the morning, it's a great opportunity to go midday to look for your dragonflies. There's no courtship. They don't have any of those wonderful displays of courtship, no flowers, no candy, no nothing. The male just kind of pounces on the female, and because they only live for a short time and they want to take advantage of it to reproduce. The male will grab the female by the back of the head, and that's called a tandem linkage, where the two will be flying around. And if you've looked, you may have seen this. You see two dragonflies flying together. I hope many of you have already seen that. Here's a damselfly. The male is connecting to the back of the female damselfly's head. And some other dragonflies also, these are blue dashers, that he is connecting to the female. And they're in a tandem position. But then the male will have taken, remember I said that he had two sets of genitalia? He will take his sperm from the end of his abdomen and put it in that special area, the secondary genitalia, under the second segment of his abdomen. And then the female will curl her abdomen around and take the sperm out of that segment. And these are two different types of dragonflies that are in what's called a wheel position. The wheel position can last for minutes to hours, and some will do it even in flight. So you may have seen them in this wheel position. A lot of the time, the male may be removing the sperm of another male, a competitor, so that only his sperm is left when he puts it into the female. There's damselflies in a wheel position. And after that happens, the males will usually hang around the females, either in tandem position, helping her to fly, or just near her to protect her. It's really not to protect her, but it's to protect his progeny. He doesn't want any other rival to get in there. I've seen another male come in, and two dragonflies were in tandem position, and another rival male will come in and knock them into the water to separate the female. They can be fairly aggressive in that. Oops. Another one in the tandem linkage. And then the female will lower her abdomen into the water to lay her eggs. They lay them in mud, depending on the species and the area, they will lay them into the mud, directly into the water, or maybe into a reed. Oh, sorry. You may have seen common green darners like this, where the male is still linked with her and she's laying her eggs into the water. This one I saw on a soccer field that was overwatered in our neighborhood, and it was a big puddle, and so this dragonfly was using that puddle to lay its eggs. This is a male helping the he's kind of doing more of the flying for her as he lowers her into the water to lay her eggs. After the eggs hatch, out come the larva. And that is a baby dragonfly. These are ones you probably don't see as often because they're underwater. And they have the same body parts of the head, a thorax, and an abdomen, but they look a little different because they have a different function. At the end of this abdomen, this one has gills, and that's how they breathe when underwater. But they have different functions because they generally lay in wait at the bottom. They don't necessarily pursue their prey. Some of them can pursue their prey with little bursts of water out to kind of move them forward, and they have jaws that open up. They can eat aquatic larvae, fish, and even tadpoles as they get bigger. They're very important water indicators of water quality. They're bioindicators, and so a lot of entomologists will study, and water biologists will study the damselfly larva and the dragonfly larva that are in the water. But I'm not going to cover how to identify them today. That was a damselfly. This is a dragonfly larva, and you can see that it is coated with some sediment, and it's great protective way of camouflage. This damselfly is now going to go into a new instar. You can see the back of it is starting to split open. That's how it will shed its skin, and then will become a larger nymph. The final molt, the dragonflies climb out of the water, and you may have seen things like this attached to reeds where the dragonfly has actually emerged. This is a darner that is attached to a reed, and this one is probably, the adult has probably emerged in that final molt. Here you can see the hole in the back of the exoskeleton, the exuvia that has been shed. And out comes an adult dragonfly. They call them tenorals. And the dragonfly is kind of soft, and it has to warm up and pump blood into those wings. And so it's hanging, just drying out. If you've ever seen a butterfly emerge from a chrysalis, that it will just hang there until its wings are pumped up and until it hardens and dries. So that's its life cycle. And as it goes through its life cycle, it may face many perils because dragonflies will play an important part in the food web, and particularly for birders. Here they are, you can see they're in tandem position. So they may have been laying eggs in the water when this little blue heron grabbed them. A snowy egret also has dragonflies. Dragonflies are a great catch for birds. They have a meaty body. Herons are near the water, and so are the dragonflies, and that makes them very vulnerable to the herons. If you've ever watched herons stalking a dragonfly, you'll see them. You know how the herons will move their heads to look at prey. But even phoebes and flycatchers will eat dragonflies, and kestrels. This was a double-fisted one. It caught 2 dragonflies. And if you look at the bottom left of this screen, you'll see a frog. This frog is stalking these dragonflies. but they also can fly into spider webs. So they're a very important part of the food chain. I like this start to this poem. Restless dragonfly, darting, dancing over the ribbons of trailing weed. Cease a while from thy myriad glancing, poised on the curve of a swinging reed. And I am going to be looking at some of the behaviors now. I'm going to show you how they dart and how they dance and how they get their foods and why they may be on a trailing reed or a swinging reed. Behavior in dragonflies is all about getting food. I mean, that's what it is about birds or any life. It's how do I get my food? How do I reproduce? We talked about reproduction. Now we're going to talk about food. Like our swifts and our swallows, some dragonflies get their prey by constantly flying. I mean, they're almost constantly flying. They may land on a reed for a little while, but most of them are flying the entire time. It's called hawking, that they're constantly flying for their prey. And that's true for our darners and some of our other dragonflies. And that's going to be important when we're trying to identify a dragonfly. You can look at the behavior, and like just as you look at a swallow or a swift and you're looking up, you know that that's a swallow or a swift. You may not know which one, but you can tell it just a bit on its behavior. But there's some dragonflies that are more like flycatchers. If you've looked at flycatchers, you know that they often come back to the same location. They'll fly out and then they'll come back to the same perch. And that's true also for a lot of dragonflies. It's called sallying, where they sally out, grab their prey, and then they'll come back to their same perch. Damselflies may eat their prey by gleaning insects off of reeds, just like our bush tit or our ruby crown kinglets. They're gleaning the insects off the stems of the plants. So that's how they're eating behaviors. But they can also be very territorial. And so just as you've seen a hummingbird come and it'll be right in your face, well, dragonflies will sometimes do that too. They'll come and they'll challenge you, but mostly what they're doing is challenging any rivals, and they're chasing the other rivals out of their patch, just like hummingbirds do. Some dragonflies are known to migrate, just as our monarch butterflies or Canada geese do. Like the monarch butterflies, when they do their migrations, they start in one location and it's a different generation that comes back. It's not the exact same butterfly, or in this case, the same dragonfly. Less is known about dragonfly migration than is certainly about bird migration or even butterfly migration. It hasn't been studied as much, but there are at least 16 species that are known to migrate. But like the Canada geese, some populations are resident and some migrate. So some of our Canada geese live here all year round and breed here, and then others migrate out up north. Same thing with dragonflies. Some of them will stay here all year round, but there are some portion of the same population that will migrate. Okay, before beginning a hunt, it is wise to ask someone what you are looking for before you begin looking for it. Very wise. So if you're going out on the dragonfly survey or dragonfly count, it's good to know what dragonflies you're looking for. So it's good if you have a field guide. There are a lot of field guides that you can get for dragonflies, And I believe that Vincent will send out a list of what are the common dragonflies in our area and even some images. I think some of you, if there's anybody on the line who's not from the local area, or maybe even you're out in the desert or in other areas, the dragonflies I'm going to cover today are the ones that are here locally to Palos Verdes. But some of the things that I'm going to talk about by what to look for with a field guide will help you find your own dragonflies. So don't panic. If any of you know Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, don't panic. I'm going to break it down so that some of these dragonflies become a little bit easier to identify. I'm going to do them in groups. You can look along if you want to take notes, of course you can, but with your own field guides, they should be helpful to identify the dragonflies. The other thing is you may just want to admire dragonflies and say it's a dragonfly. Hopefully, I've already told you the difference between a dragonfly and a damselfly, so you'll recognize that. But you can just sit back and watch these slides and just appreciate the diversity and the beauty of the dragonflies. Some of them are going to be easy to identify. Everybody knows our California scrub jay. That's going to be pretty easy. You're not going to get that confused with any of our other local birds. But some are going to be a little bit more like our empids. If you know these flycatchers, you just pull out your hair and you say, okay, I'm going to just put it down as an empid flycatcher. Dragonflies are going to be the same way. Some are going to be easy and some are going to be a little harder. And of course, the female dragonflies, like the female ducks, can be a little bit more challenging. But you can certainly tell a warbler from a sparrow. You may not know which warbler it is or which sparrow, but you know based on its behavior and its general shape, and you can still appreciate it. So I made up this chart, and I know that there's a couple of entomologists on this call, or there may be, who are going to sit here and say, that's not how you identify dragonflies. You have to look at their genitalia, or you look at their wing patterns and the veins. But for somebody who's a birder, who's out in the field and is going to admire them, you just want to know, what is that dragonfly? And some of them are pretty easy to identify. So I broke this up into 4 groups that we're going to cover. First of all, you know if it's dragonfly or a damselfly, or at least I hope you do by now, that the dragonfly is the big ones and the little skinny ones are the damselflies. And then I talked about their behavior. Are they continually flying? They just will not land. Well, then it's going to be in the first group that I'm going to go through. Or did they fly and constantly come back to a perch? If they fly and constantly come back to a perch, there's 4 in our local area that are pretty easy to identify, kind of like that scrub jay. But then you've got some that are just bright red, and those are a little bit more challenging. But hopefully I'm going to give you the information to even break those down further if you want to. And then I'll cover the damselflies. And I put a disclaimer that this chart is for the most common species in our area. Certainly something else could fly in and try to get a picture or identify it or write it down. And then that would be pretty cool. So we're going to go through our dragonflies and then our damsels. The first group of continually flying they're continually flying, the darners, and then the gliders, and then the saddlebags. Darners, in general, have a needle-like body. It's long and it's particularly thin. And one of our most common ones is called the common green darner. And the male and the female both have a green thorax, and that's the only dragonfly in our local area, or the most common dragonfly in our local area that has a green thorax. So that's going to be pretty easy to identify. And there's one. There's a male common green darner. You can see it's got a long needle-like body, constantly flying, have to take the photo in flight, and has a green body, thorax. That's our anatomy. Oops. Here's another one. This one did come down and perch. They don't perch that often. This one may have just emerged and is still warming up. They will perch occasionally. When they do perch, it's usually up and down, straight up and down. And you can see it's got a green thorax, long skinny body, common green darner. Here's a pair that are mating. See the male and the female? They both have that green thorax. Something else that these common green darners have is they sometimes call it a bullseye, which is this pattern on its head. It's indicative of a common green darner. You don't really have to know it, but it's pretty cool. And there it is, close up with its antenna, little antenna. So that's our common green darner. We have one other darner in our area, which is the blue-eyed darner. It's got a needle-like body. It's got blue eyes. The female has a needle-like body, but the thorax isn't green. So if it's a darner in our area that has a needle-like body, it may not have blue eyes because it's a female, but if its thorax is not green, then it's probably a blue-eyed darner, and they have clear wings. So similar to the common green darner, it's got that long, thin abdomen, needle-like abdomen, and you can see this one has blue eyes. And there's a male and a female. You can see the female is a little bit more challenging. You might just know, well, it's a dragonfly, or maybe you can get down to say, well, it's that long, skinny body. So that's the darner, but it doesn't have a green thorax, so it's likely a blue-eyed darner. And a good place to look for them is at Harbor Lake. And I know you go birding there, so look for your dragonflies there too. The next group are the gliders. And they have a slightly fatter body. I'm going to show you their bodies, and then you'll know what to look for. They have a slightly flatter body than our darners, but they are also continually flying. And their colors are usually orange or brown, and the female is duller, and they have clear wings. So there is a glider. This is the wandering glider. You can see that the abdomen is a little bit fuller. It's not quite as needle-like as the other one. And you can see these either with binoculars or even with your bare eye. But these are in duller colors. These are in these orangey gold colors. And there's a female, and you can see the clear wings and that orangish abdomen, and slightly thicker than a darner. So this is a glider, but they're usually continually flying. When they do land, they're up and down, vertical. Oh, no, I'm right, sorry. Next is the spot wing glider. It's also a glider. It's got that slightly fatter body, dull orange brown, and the female's a little bit duller. The hind wings have a dark spot close to the body, and that's the difference between the wandering glider and the spot wing glider. Here it is. You can barely see. I'm going to point to it here. There's the spot on the wing. Some of them are more obvious than others, but you can see it's that dullish orange. It's a flatter body, continually flying. So therefore, it is the glider. And you might know, okay, dragonfly, and you say, okay, it's a glider. Maybe you can't tell the difference, and that's fine. But if you see those spots, you know it's a spot wing glider. Here are the spot wing glider. You can see the spots. This one, probably a female, has those spots very inconspicuous, but you can still make them out. So you know it's a spot wing glider. These were quite abundant last year. Was it last year or the year before? I think it was last year. But they were, these ones migrate, so there were large numbers of these coming through our area, and they were feeding almost in packs. But here at the LA River at Willow Street, great birding spot, they were all up and down here. And this is where I always see my wandering gliders. You can still see some other dragonflies in this area, but particularly the gliders seem to follow that bike trail. There's some other dragonflies, the saddlebags, that fly continually, like the darners and like the gliders, but their hind wings have a big patch, and it's not going to be confused with the other ones, but it's a continually flying dragonfly. These perch a little bit more often, and they're called saddlebags because it looks like they have saddlebags. And there we have two in our area, the red saddlebags and the black saddlebags. And you can see that this is a red saddlebag. So you can see how large those spots are in the back. The female is a duller color. So this is also a red saddlebags. Red saddlebags seen from the side. One of the reasons why they may have that kind of coloration in their wings, besides making a little bit cryptic coloration for when they do land, is it also can shade their thorax and help provide some cooling. There's another red saddlebags female. But we have another saddlebags. It's called the black saddlebags, and you're probably not going to confuse it with red saddlebags because it's very similar, but look how dark it is. Not quite black, but when it's flying, it will look black. This is Madrona Marsh. I'm assuming you are all familiar with that or mostly familiar with that. And there's tons of different types of dragonflies that you can find here. Definitely worth going out in the summer to look for them. So when you are watching a continually flying dragonfly that just won't land, ask yourself, is it a needle-like darner? Is it really needle-like? Then it's probably a darner. And then is it a common green darner or a blue-eyed darner with that green abdomen? Or if it's not that, is it a glider or a saddlebags? Check the spots or the splotches and the sides of them, and that will tell you which it is. So our next group of dragonflies are the easier ones that I said to identify. These are going to fly and they're going to perch often, and you're going to get good looks at them because they're going to be perched and you can get your binoculars on them. And that we have four that I'm going to go through that are pretty easy to identify. One is the blue dasher. You can identify it because it is blue with those green eyes. But of course, the female is going to give you trouble. There's one. They have their wings cupped slightly forward. That's the way they perch. And they're going to be perched there for a while so you can get your binoculars on them. But as I said, the female is going to be a little bit more difficult to identify. She's usually going to be further away from the pond until it's really time to mate, and then she'll come closer to the pond. So you may see those out in the field. Next is the roseate skimmer. The clues are in their names. The other one was the blue dasher. It's blue. Here's the roseate skimmer. It's going to be a very rosy color, pink to purple. They're beautiful. I don't see these as often, but they are beautiful. But if you see a pink dragonfly in our area, it is probably the roseate skimmer. And the other one that's fairly easy is the Mexican amberwing. It's got its name in there, which is amber. And so it's going to be an amber color. And it's going to be a little bit smaller. There it is, amber. And then the last one is the variegated meadowhawk, which is going to have stripes, a little silvery blue. Silvery and orange, but its wings are going to be held forward. Meadowhawks like to hold their wings forward. There's a male reddish and the female, or a cool one in the morning, that's going to be a little bit more orangey, but it's got those silvery stripes. Good place to see them, El Dorado Regional Park. There's a lot of places. There's a nature center if you haven't been over. It's got lots of ponds, good birding also. So if you're watching a dragonfly that comes back to its perch and it isn't solid red or orange, then it is either a blue dasher, if it's blue, if it's pink, roseate skimmer, amber, Mexican amberwing, and striped, then it's the meadowhawk. So these are probably easier to identify. So it's not that scary after all. But then if you get the red ones, they're a little bit harder to identify, but we can even identify those. If it's drooping its wings forward like that variegated meadowhawk, then it's probably a cardinal meadowhawk. If it's red, it's got a smaller patch of orange on the wings. But see how it's drooping those wings forward? And only a small patch of orange on the wing. The red-tail pennant is mostly clear-winged, and it's got a very drab thorax. See the brown thorax? If you see a red dragonfly with a brown thorax, now you've got your red-tail pennant. And the flame skimmer. The key to that is that the orange wash on the wing is almost half of the wing, and they hold their wings horizontal. The female will be duller, but there it is. And this is one that everyone takes a picture of because they are such a gorgeous dragonfly. But see how far that orange spreads? But I did warn you about the females being a little bit harder. You can just say dragonfly, female dragonfly. But it's got that white stripe down its back. And here's a male and female flame skimmer. I have several pictures of flame skimmers just because they're so gorgeous and I couldn't cut out all my pictures. And the last of our red dragonflies is the neon skimmer, and it's got a rusty wash on the wings that's only about a quarter of the wing. But it's the brightest red dragonfly. It just doesn't seem it because the orange on the wing isn't as wide. But you can see it's only about a quarter of the wing and not half the wing. Another great place to see dragonflies, Bixby Marshland. Vincent volunteers over there, and it's open only once a month, but right now because of COVID it's not open, but another great place for dragonflies. So when watching a dragonfly that comes back to its perch and it's red, check the red on the wings. Do they droop forward? Cardinal meadowhawk. Do they have clear wings and a brown thorax? Red-tailed pennant. Is it half the wing is red? Flame skimmer. And a quarter red? It's a neon skimmer. So they're really not that hard to identify once you get used to them, but you can use that things to look for when you look in a field guide. If you're in a different area or you see something that looks different, look for those things. What is the body shape? Where is the markings on the wing? How much of the wing has got color on it? And behavior can be very helpful. So our two dragonfly, actually there are three damsels that are common in our area. There are others, but the most common are the vivid dancer, the common bluet, and the Pacific forktail. So the vivid dancer, like all dancers, their wings are raised above their body, and they may be resting on the dirt or rocks. They have broad black stripes and are a vivid blue. So there is a vivid dancer, but notice how its wings are held. Dancers hold their wings above their body. There's one that's the female, different coloration, but the wings are going to be held in a very similar manner. Right now, this one seems to have a damaged wing, so it's not being held up. But if they're raised above the body, there's a male and a female, then it is a dancer. And the one most common in our area is the vivid dancer. But one that looks very similar is the bluet. And we have the familiar bluet in our area, and that's the most common in our area. It's a little bit smaller than the vivid dancer, but its wings rest next to its body. See how they're resting next to the body and not above it? And there's the female. And the other ones that we have around here are forktails, and we particularly have the Pacific forktail. And they you can identify because their abdomen is black with a little band at the tip. And see that long, thin black body? It's not one of our bluets, it's not a dancer, so it's that black body is a forktail. And there's a female. And you may see damselflies particularly, but you can also see dragonflies around your own pond. If you have your own pond at your house, this happens to be Rancho Los Cerritos, so they have a lovely pond there, but always check ponds for damsels and dragonflies. And for references, there are several good books. Always look for, just like with birding, you're gonna look, if you look at Sibley's, I have my Sibley's right next to my desk. It's going to have every bird in North America. But if you want one for your local region, it's always good to start small and get a guide for your local area. The Museum of Natural History also has Insects of the Los Angeles Basin that also has dragonflies and damselflies in it. And that Wild in LA tells you some great places where you can go and look for look not just for damsels and dragonflies, but all kinds of wildlife. And iNaturalist, you can post photos on there and they can have a citizen science of people identifying your damsels and dragons for you. So in conclusion, always be on the lookout for the presence of wonder. And I see there's a lot of questions in the chat. And somebody else has started sharing a screen. I see in the chat, let's see what we have here. I hope I didn't go too fast. It's hard to do a presentation when you can't really be watching people. Okay, I traveled through your website. Thank you very much. 4 wings and a prayer. Sally forth. Yes, they sally out. Do you need binoculars to see the details? If you have a camera, and I know, Nancy, you often carry a camera also, the camera will help and binoculars will help to see details, but often you can see them even without that with your naked eye. No western pond hawk in Palos Verde. I'm not going to say that no, there is none. I'm not as familiar with that. The ones I have shown are the ones that are the most common in our area. So you could get other ones and use your field guide to help identify them. I don't know every dragonfly in our area. Lots of compliments. I thank you. In some areas in Mexico, they call them Caballo del Diablo, devil's horse. Yes. And lots of very nice comments. Thank you. So, okay, very good. So I guess people can take themselves off mute and ask
so if
questions.
anybody wants to ask a question, feel free to take yourself off mute and go ahead and ask away.
Kim, how do you get all those great aerial shots?
Patience. Well, you know, that's where it is. The same thing with birds and insects is watch them and watch their behavior. And that's what can help. You get, when you see their behavior, like the particularly like the darners, they move back and forth, but they come back and challenge you always to the same spot, even in the air, and just watch and shoot.
Very nice.
Thank you. Thank
Kim?
you. Yeah?
I have a question. Do the females drop eggs in the water and then the male drops sperm separately?
No. The female, when she's bringing her abdomen up to him in that wheel position, she's getting his sperm and the eggs are fertilized before they drop.
Yeah, because I've been over to the nature center, in Long Beach, and I watched. I saw this. It looked like the female was dropping eggs.
Uh-huh.
And there was a male right above it, and they weren't connected. And it was, so do they ever do that? Do you know?
Ever do what? Not.
Fertilize the eggs as it goes into the water.
No. That's why she has that wheel position. She's getting the sperm there.
Okay, thanks. Good presentation.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a question in the chat. Is there a season when dragonflies are out and about?
Summer. That's the high season here. Even the ones that migrate through may migrate in, and they will have their eggs in spring in the water, and then they will emerge in summer, and that's when you're seeing all the adult from the prior season, mostly at that point. And I invite Art Evans to, if you have any comments on my scientific knowledge, to jump in. Actually, others too, but in summer is when you see them the most, and they go through a season. So when they lay their eggs, as adults, that's their purpose, is to lay eggs. They lay their eggs in the summer, and then they come out in the next season.
And one more question in the chat. What do dragonflies eat?
Oh, dragonflies will be eating mosquitoes and all kinds of flying gnats and anything that's over the water that's flying insects.
And Vincent put his email address over in the chat if anybody would like to participate in our dragonfly count on June 19th. So please look that up. It's StephenVincentLloyd@gmail.com. So.
Hey, Kim, I've got a question, comment, if I could. This is Roy.
Hi, Roy.
Hi. First, Alondra Park, and that pond lake is a good place to see dragonflies too.
Yes, thank you.
And yeah, Alondra Park in years past, and now I've seen this happen in other places, and so there'll be a large aggregation of like 10, 20, 30, 40 flying through the wooded area, not over water, but like in the trees, and it's a brownish color, and I can't ever get focused on them because they're just always moving. So do you have an idea what that might be on that vague description?
I'm guessing that those were those gliders that were coming in. We had so many spot wing gliders, mostly spot wing, but we also had some of the wandering gliders, particularly in the last year or so. And they were flying very high in the trees, and they're migrating through, and then they feed in swarms in the air. I've also seen with like yellow rump warblers when they're out, or warblers gathering insects. I've seen dragonflies mixed in with warbler flocks when they're eating insects in the air.
Thank you. And great presentation, by the way, Kim. And could I add a little thing about when they're predators in the water? Maybe you can add that too. I hear they can eat fish and frogs.
Yes.
Tadpoles, I mean, and things like that.
Yes, that's as larvae. As
Yeah.
larvae, they don't compete with their adults, because the adults are eating the insects in the air, but the larvae, the naiads, are eating the insects in the water.
And animals with backbones too.
Yes, tadpoles, tiny tadpoles.
And small fish sometimes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Great,
I
great
wanted
presentation.
to, I wanted to know, do dragonflies vary in where they migrate? Are there flyways like with birds, or does each species have its own destination? Or is there a mix? And if so, where are they going?
Yeah, those are great questions. Mexico to Canada, I don't know specifically. In fact, has not been a lot of research, and it's only more recently that they even knew that they did migrate. There may be some people who have studied them a little bit more, but it's not like they did that big program with monarchs where they were tagging the monarchs to find out. I don't think there have been the big studies on the dragonflies like that. It's only a more recent phenomena.
Oh,
And I certainly don't know.
yeah. Oh, great presentation. I should point out about the gliders.
Yes.
The migratory ones. They have the typical larva, the naiads for typical dragonflies are like a couple of years. They're for a month to 2 months. So they may be laying it because those are what they call rain pool gliders. And yeah, so that they'll lay their eggs and then they'll keep on going. And in fact, that is probably, I don't know if maybe Art knows different, but as far as I know, that's the one insect over several generations that has the longest migration from the tip of India. The ones in India, the ones they go from the tip of India to the tip of Africa in like 4 generations.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I don't know where they're not migrating here. I don't know. The Xerxes Society, I think, is in charge of that, monitoring them. So I guess I don't have it. I'll have to maybe send an email to somebody, but they have like they want to collect information on migrating dragonflies. So if anyone, I don't have it with me, but I'll have to get it to somebody.
And things like iNaturalist also, which collects a lot of information about insects and where they are. Hopefully we'll get more information and collect more information so that there is more known about them.
One more question in the chat, and it was answered, but is there a database similar to eBird for dragonflies and damsels? And Naturalist gave us the website of odanagacentral.org.
Oh, great. Thank you.
And there is also a migratory ode group on iNaturalist.
Yeah, iNaturalist is a great place for all kinds of wildlife.
Are there any more questions for Kim?
Thanks, Kim. Great presentation. Your photos are phenomenal.
Oh, thank you. I have a question. Does everybody feel that they can identify a dragonfly versus a damselfly now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Good. And do you think you have a little bit better idea about some of the dragonflies that presented?
Yes, I like your way of breaking it down. It was wonderful.
Very good.
Good.
And just so everybody knows, I recorded the presentation. We'll post it on our website so you can review again if you like. So, okay. Thank you, Kim. That was a wonderful
Thank you.
presentation, and we do appreciate that.
Thank you.
Outstanding. Thank you, Kim.